I've been writing songs since I was 12 years old, and honestly, most of them are pretty terrible. And that's because I kept making the same mistakes over and over again. So in this video, I'm going to tell you about my 6 most frequent mistakes and how to avoid them, so you don't have to waste years figuring it out yourself. But first of all, hi! My name is Indigo, I'm a singer and songwriter, and I started this channel to talk about songwriting because I feel like not many channels actually go into depth when it comes to songwriting on YouTube, so that's what I'm here for. If you're interested in the topic, if you're a songwriter yourself, or you want to start writing songs, this channel is for you. And now, let's get straight into today's video. Okay, so the first thing is that I always use the same chord progression. And that works maybe for a couple of songs, but at some point everything that you write is so similar and it starts to sound pretty much the same. And that's why I feel like it's so important to switch up chord progressions. Also, using different instruments can definitely benefit your songwriting. I remember a day where I showed my mom some of my songs. I used to be very secretive about my songs. I never showed them to anyone. Maybe like one friend I sent it to her, but apart from that, I was keeping them all to myself. But I remember I played some of them to her and she was like, "Is this like another song right now, or is it still the same because it sounds so similar?" And I took it as an offense back then. I was like, oh my god, she's so rude, but it was actually true. If I look back at my songs, I'm like, this could all be the same song because it's so similar. So I definitely recommend to use different instruments, use different methods, and definitely use different chord progressions. Another thing is definitely the amount of lyrics I used, because back then I always thought it's the best if I use as much lyrics as possible and complicated lyrics, like show off my English skills and my vocabulary. And I think if you look at many famous songs, they are that good because they're so easy to memorize, and it's because the lyrics are so simple. It's because sometimes they just take the same word or phrase and repeat it so often throughout the whole song, and that's what makes it memorable. Or in general, phrases that are very easy to understand, that's how people memorize it. That's what makes the song so great. Of course, there's not like the right amount of words you're supposed to use, like this is still art and you can do whatever you want. But it just made me think, because I love Tate McRae and I analyzed some of her lyrics and I realized, for example, "It's okay, I'm okay," or "sports car." That's so simple language and it works so well and people love listening to it and memorize it well. So really pay attention to that, and then you can still like try to make lyrics with complicated words, try to make lyrics with simple words, and see what works the best for you. But I feel like it's always great to pay attention to details like that. When it comes to the lyrics itself, another thing I realized was that I loved to use the same rhymes, and I don't think that it's a good idea to restrict yourself and be like, oh, I already used this rhyme in another song, so I'm not gonna use it in this, or this and that artist just put out a song and they used this rhyme, so I cannot use it now. I think that's stupid. You can use whatever rhyme you want, but your songs are gonna sound very similar at some point, and it's all gonna be very similar in general if you constantly use the same rhymes. If you just kind of practice songwriting, put lyrics that you would usually not go for, and then try to find completely new rhymes. Like if you end a sentence in a way you would usually not end it with, that puts you out of your comfort zone, and then you have to find new rhymes that you never used before. So I feel like messing with rhyming, and also not using perfect rhymes, but just using similar rhymes, is also a great way to get out of your comfort zone and kind of mess around with songwriting. I think lyrics-wise and storytelling-wise, one of the biggest mistakes I used to make was just writing without knowing what it's about. And before you come after me and you're like, what? This is an intuitive process. Like, I'm supposed to just start writing and start finding melody, and then at some point I just see a clear picture and know what this is even about. Of course that's true, but at some point you should be really aware of what this is about. Even if it just happens throughout the writing process, at some point you should actually know what you're writing about. Like at some point this should be a clear picture, a story, a letter to a person, whatever. But a thing I used to do was just writing random scenes, random stuff, and I think there are different types of listeners. Like there are people that really pay attention to the lyrics and people that just do not care at all. But I also think this depends on what type of music you're listening to, but usually pop songs are like known for storytelling. And if you don't even know what you're writing about and it's all not adding up, I think that's one of the worst things you can do with a song. In my opinion, there's supposed to be like a storyline, or like at least a picture you visualize and then you write about that. But if you don't even know what this is about yourself, how is the listener supposed to interpret something or feel something if this is so messy to you already. That's just my point of view, and this is the thing I used to do back then, that I just wrote random stuff and I didn't even know what I was writing about. I think one of the things that definitely leveled up my songwriting the most was getting into music production. And I'm not considering that you should become a professional music producer. You also don't have to produce your own songs, but I feel like every songwriter should at least know one DAW and be able to put samples into that and record their vocals, because that really changes everything. At least it changed everything for me. I personally started to get into Logic, and then I also got a membership for Splice, and I started using samples. And samples really changed my life, because you have so different vibes and chord progressions and melodies, and that gives you already such a different starting point. If you don't want to pay for Splice, you can obviously go and search for beats on YouTube. You can generally see if you find any free platforms. If you ever want a video of that, if you want me to do some research and tell you about it, of course I can do that too. Just write it into the comments and let me know. But I feel like that really changed everything for me personally, and also working with a music producer changed everything, because he could do exactly the beats that I wanted, and then I can write on that. I can just recommend it to anyone to get a little bit into production. Or obviously, if you don't want to get into production at all and you can afford it, then get a producer. And that's also leading me to our last point for today, which is feedback. And I know this is so simple, but I feel like many songwriters are like very secretive about their stuff, especially if they're not independent artists or artists who put out music. And you're scared, like you're scared of judgment, you're scared what other people think, so you're just keeping it to yourself. But honestly, feedback levels up everything, because even if it's just people who have nothing to do with music, who are just listeners and don't know anything about songwriting or music production, sometimes those people give you the most honest and most valuable feedback, because they will tell you stuff that even people that are into music production or into songwriting won't know, because they're already like at a professional level, so they view everything differently. But the people that will listen to your music in the end are the people that are not professionals, that are just simple listeners, like listening to your stuff on Spotify or Apple Music or any other streaming platform. So getting their feedback, if they're like, oh, this is boring, this is not working, like I would stop listening here because the tension is not building, that's the best feedback you can get. So actually get out of your comfort zone and show this to your friends, show it to your family, get the feedback in. Obviously get the feedback by people who would also listen to the style of music, because for example, my dad and my brother, they like house music, they don't like pop music, so I don't think they're the best people to ask for advice for, because they don't listen to this type of music in general. But I ask my friends that also like the same type of music that I make. I ask my mom, who also loves listening to this type of music. And then at some point, if you do this professionally, of course you can also ask professionals like a mixing and mastering engineer, a producer, other artists you meet online or you know. Also, if you know any other songwriters, feedback of songwriters is so valuable. So don't be afraid, and also don't take everything personally, because feedback is there to make you grow. And if you take it personally and you're like, oh my god, they're hurting my art and now I'm hurt, like you really have to work on your mindset, because this is not an attack to you personally. This is just an honest, raw thing you can take and make something out of it, and then like that you just get better. So I think this is actually the most important point, and I didn't do that back then, and I'm so glad that I have so much feedback now and I can actually work with it. So this is it for today's video. I hope that you learned something from all my mistakes and you're gonna take some of my advice in and maybe level up your songwriting in that way. And if you don't want to miss any more videos about songwriting and music, then don't forget to follow me. And I would very, very much appreciate if you would listen to my most recent release on Spotify. It's out now. And with that said, see you in the next video.